All right. Welcome to the Morning Report. My name is Willie Lawson. I trust that you are well this glorious, glorious day. I need to explain something in a way that's extremely simple because the world is getting a lot less simple, especially concerning the events of the weekend. Now, work with me here. Imagine that you're in eighth grade. Remember eighth grade? I do, barely, barely, but I remember. Your class is responsible for a school project. Okay. Your job is to take care of your classroom. You need to keep it clean. You need to keep it organized. You need to make sure that everyone understands the lesson. Now, imagine that while you're trying to do that, somebody bursts into the classroom and starts yelling about something that's happening across town. Now, what's happening across town, it might be important, but it's not your classroom. And if you stop teaching, and if you stop cleaning, and if you stop organizing, and spend all of your time talking about what's happening across town, your classroom falls apart. That's what happens in politics when candidates forget what job they're running for. Okay. Now we're heading into the 2026 midterm elections, right? And there are serious things happening in the world. There are, right? There are tensions overseas. Obviously, there are conflicts. There are loud headlines. But I'm gonna hone this down to my friends here in Florida, and this applies to other places too. Governors do not run the world. Governors run states, and our governors run states in the United States. So if candidates lose focus on what actually improves the life inside their state, they will lose their election. Now, I want to slow this down and be super clear now. Midterm elections are not about global theory. Midterm elections are about daily life. They're about what happens when a family wakes up in the morning. Can they afford groceries? Can they afford their rent or their mortgage? Is the school that they're sending their kids, is it safe? Is their insurance premium rising again? Oh, I got a notice from our homeowners about policy that, hey, listen, what you have now is still the best option, and it went down. Well, it did go down. Praise God for every dollar that it went down. I think it went down like $11. And I'll take it. I was like, yep, sign me up. you know. Well, is there a job that's available that pays enough to live on? Those are questions that voters carry into the voting booth. Not nuclear strategy, not diplomatic doctrine, and definitely not some cable news arguments. They carry into the ballot booth daily life. And here's something extremely important. When the world gets loud, the temptation is to get louder. Candidates do feel pressure to comment on everything. The media asks, well, what do you think about this conflict? What about that country? What about this global crisis? And if the candidate isn't disciplined, they will drift. They'll start sounding like foreign policy analysts instead of a governor. And here's the truth. And it is simple. If you are running to manage a state, then you must talk about managing a state. When you get old, you have stories. If you'll follow me down this rabbit trail for a second, I think it was the second time I ran for county commission here in the district that I'm sitting in now. I actually went to two of the local newspapers ostensibly, I guess, seeking endorsements. Neither one of them that I think that I would get an endorsement. But I thought, I was fired up. A number of years ago, I was fired up. So one of the newspapers I went to was La Gaceta here in Tampa. Now, La Gaceta has the distinction of being the nation's only trilingual newspaper. Yes, you read it, and it is in English, and it is in Spanish, and it is in Italian. It's kind of cool. And their office is not very far from where I'm sitting right now, maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes. And I got to talk to the editor, who is the son of the founder. So I went right to their entire editorial board of one person, and we sat down, and he was very kind, and we started talking. We started talking about things that are going on in the district. Actually, their office is in the district I was running for. Now, I ran as a Republican. La Gaceta is, definitely on the left. Definitely on the left. And he didn't make any bones about that. And asked me why I was doing this, because I was kind of a novelty act, right? Because I was the black Republican running in the 70-30 Democrat district that had never had a Republican county commissioner. So I think he found that sort of novel. He pressed me on some things about the district, and then seemingly out of nowhere asked me about abortion. Now, I still can't imagine a time where, as a county commissioner, that I would have to answer a question or vote on something having to do with abortion. And basically, I told him that. And he kind of smiled. And he said, yeah, you're probably right. Except that as a candidate, now he reframed the whole thing. Now watch what he did. He said, but as a candidate, if you are successful, you may go on to another office that this becomes an issue, and we need to know, where you stand on these issues. And because I was not good at this, I was not good at that at all. I let him reframe the whole thing, and I went down that rabbit hole. 15 minutes later, I guess he got tired of it. I noticed that I had spent 15 minutes talking about abortion, but I had not spent 15 minutes talking about our road conditions. I had not spent 15 minutes talking about infrastructure changes. I had not spent 15 minutes talking about the things in my district, bringing businesses to my district. I had not spent 15 minutes talking about any of that. I had not spent 15 minutes talking about a concept I had about intelligent development. I spent 15 minutes talking about something that I would never get to talk about on county commission. He got me to drift my narrative. Now, what I found out later is that voters want competence. They want someone who understands the job that they're applying for. So if I go into a job interview to become a school principal, and I spend the entire interview talking about international trade policy, they're going to wonder, what does this dude think this job is? And it's the same with governors, and the same with county commissioners and mayors and city council people. The job of a governor is to balance a budget, improve education, support public safety, attract businesses, reduce taxes where possible, and strengthen infrastructure. That's it. That's it. Because now we need to talk about something that's very important. And I just explained it to you. Narrative drift. Narrative drift happens when campaigns stop leading and start reacting, like I reacted in that discussion with La Gaceta. So instead of setting the agenda, I let him be the headlines, and they set it for me. If something happens overseas, they pivot. If something trends on social media, they pivot again. Before long, they're talking about everything and standing for nothing. And that's how campaigns lose their identity. And when voters can't clearly answer the question, what does this guy stand for? The candidate will lose. I want to make something extremely clear here. National security matters. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what's happening in Iran right now doesn't matter, because it most certainly does. National security matters. The world, it matters. But state and local elections are not decided by global theory. They're decided by things like grocery bills and affordability, because this is still the number one issue. Families are stretched. Even as inflation slows, prices, if you notice, remain high. Rent is out freaking outrageous. Home ownership is dang near impossible. Insurance premiums, I just talked about our insurance premium here, are in many states are crushing families. Healthcare is rising. The cost is getting higher and you're getting less. Now imagine a candidate that spends 10 minutes talking about, or 15 minutes talking about geopolitical tensions overseas, but never explains how they will lower property taxes or eliminate property taxes. Which message do you think stays with the voters? There's a thing called kitchen table politics, and the kitchen table wins every single time. Because when somebody in the family sits down to pay bills, they're not debating international alliances. They're not calculating whether they can afford yet another. They're trying to figure out if they can stay another year in their house. A disciplined candidate understands this. They may acknowledge global events briefly, but then they come right back to the thing that's important. Here's what I will do to make life better right here where we are. And that pivot is the entire thing. Now let's talk about education. Parents care deeply about education. They care about reading levels. They care about math scores. They care about school safety. They care about curriculum transparency. They care about whether their child is being prepared for real life. Foreign conflicts do not erase any of those concerns. If anything, uncertainty in the world makes parents want even more stability at home. Education policy is not abstract, personal. So a candidate must stay focused on educational choice, accountability, academic standards, parental involvement. If they drift into foreign commentary instead of addressing local schools, they miss the mark. Now let's talk about public safety. Public safety is extremely basic. It's foundational. How do people feel walking down the street? Are crime rates rising or are crime rates falling? Are we supporting law enforcement officers? Are the prosecutors enforcing the laws? And these are not abstract debates. They affect daily behavior. If a candidate ignores local crime trends to talk about global conflict, voters will notice. They will notice immediately this person doesn't have an answer for the things that are happening where I live. They're just either getting behind the person in the White House or they're getting after the person in the White House, and that's all they're doing. Now, let's just make this even more simple. Midterms are competence elections. They are not ideological thesis defenses. They're evaluations. Okay? The voters are asking this: is my life better or is my life worse? Is my state functioning well? Do I trust this person to manage my community? That's it. And here is where a lot of candidates get into trouble. They think sounding smart about global affairs makes them look strong. But in a state or local election, strength looks like focus. It looks like clear priorities, simple explanations, repeatable solutions, and calm authority. So let me explain how to answer foreign policy questions without drifting. So let's say if asked about the global conflict, a disciplined candidate says this: yes, national security matters. We support our country and we support our troops. But as governor, my responsibility is to ensure that families in this state can afford to live here, educate their children, and feel safe. So you're not avoiding the question. That is understanding the job. And now let's talk about emotional discipline. Campaigns can be emotional environments. Consultants panic. Opponents attack. Social media explodes. And under pressure, people will overreact. But elections reward steadiness. If a candidate appears reactive, voters will sense instability. And if a candidate appears grounded, focused, voters will sense leadership. And that's why discipline is not just strategy, psychology. Repetition builds trust because people will say, they always say the same thing. You can never get them off their tile. They're always saying the same thing. Clarity builds confidence. Focus builds authority. And drift destroys all three. Now, I want to make something very, very practical. If global instability affects oil prices, that becomes a domestic issue. So instead of debating foreign doctrine, a candidate might say this: if global instability raises fuel prices, here's how we will reduce state-level regulatory burdens to keep the costs down. You see what I did there? Well, these wars will make gas more expensive. Well, if that happens, we're going to see what we can do here to ease that burden on the taxpayer. If the instability affects markets, which it will, here's how we're going to protect small businesses in this state if the markets get crazy. If national politics becomes chaotic, here's how we'll keep our state government efficient and stable. Bring it home. Always bring it home. Because voters live at home. They don't live inside the cable news studios. Now, let me take a breath here. This is about understanding. Now, what we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes is about execution. How candidates structure their messaging, how they repeat it, how they avoid traps. That's very, very important. And in my particular instance, the story I told you, I did not avoid the trap. I went headlong into it. I sniffed around the outside, and then I hopped in with both feet. The trap caught me right around the neck. This is how to stay calm while the world is loud. We'll be right back. Well, hey, y'all. Thanks for coming to the show. Thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit as I discuss what I think is extremely important for candidates who are thinking about running and candidates who are running, and what to look for in our candidates that are running for state, local, and state and local offices. Again, I had the privilege of speaking with the Latino Hispanic Republican Club and the Black Republican Club of Hillsborough County last week. Really appreciated that opportunity. And any of you who want to get a hold of me, who need to come onto the program, or want me to talk about something in particular, all you have to do is send me an email at fightbackmedia@gmail.com, fightbackmedia@gmail.com, or go to the Fightback Media website, fightbackmedia.com, 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 and go to the contact section, put in your information. I'm trying to build an email list, so if I get an opportunity like I had last week to speak somewhere and you'd like to go, I'd like to let everybody know. So anyway, let's get back to the second part of this podcast where we talk about execution of staying disciplined. Thank you much. All right, let's talk about execution. Understanding the importance of message focus is step one. Executing it consistently is step two. And execution is where most campaigns fail because staying focused sounds simple, but it's not easy. When headlines are dramatic, when reporters get aggressive, when social media demands instant reactions, when opponents try to bait you into distractions, it takes discipline to stay centered. So let's walk through what disciplined execution might look like. First, define 3 core priorities. Not 10, not 12, not 50, 3. Affordability, education, public safety. These are examples. Now you can adjust the wording, but the idea remains exactly the same. If a candidate cannot clearly state their top 3 priorities in one breath, they're not ready. And clearly I was not ready. Because voters do not remember long lists. They remember themes. Make America great, right? Second, repeat those priorities in every answer. Every answer. If someone asks about energy markets overseas, connect it to affordability. If somebody asks about federal policies, connect it to state governance. If someone asks about social tension nationally, connect it to public safety locally. This repetition is not boring. It's strategic. Repetition builds recognition. Recognition builds familiarity. And familiarity builds trust. And trust wins elections. Okay, now let's talk about something that often confuses candidates. They think if they repeat themselves, they sound simple. But what they don't understand is that simple is powerful. We are not speaking to policy professors. We're talking to families. And families want and need clarity. A little bit ago, if I may drift off again, a little bit ago, our church had small groups. A lot of people who have churches now have small groups where they meet in people's homes, and and my wife and I were life group leaders, and when it came to, and every week I had to come up with a lesson, right? We might be given a topic, but we had to come up with a lesson. And I told the people who would come to our house, listen, if this wasn't simple, I wouldn't get it. I'm a simple person. I needed bare bones. I don't need a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, I don't have to have a theology degree. If I had to have a theology degree to understand this, then I would be in serious trouble. So the simplicity became my superpower. Being able to explain things to people that they understood and they could use because I made it simple enough for them to do that without dumbing it down, but making, getting to the core of it. And that's it, getting to the core of it, making it simple. And families need that clarity. If an 8th grader can understand the message, that's strength, not weakness, because clarity shows mastery. I know it so well. I can explain it to anybody. I think that that's my superpower when I talk about teaching the saxophone. I can make it so simple that I can teach anyone because I understand it so well. And if something is complex, it often hides confusion. People don't really understand it. Right? Now let's address a political reality. Opponents will try to force narrative drift. They want to get you off topic. They want to take you in that room where they live and beat you to death, right? You just can't go with them. They may accuse a candidate of being, quote, out of touch for not discussing global crises extensively. They may say, why are you talking more about what's happening overseas? The disciplined response is calm, because I'm running to serve this state, because I'm running to serve this county, because I'm running to serve this city. My focus is on improving life here. And that answer signals maturity. It signals understanding of the role. It signals steadiness. And steadiness is attractive to voters. Now let's talk about the emotional environment of 2026. I think voters are tired. They're tired of chaos. They're tired of the constant outrage, because outrage is the thing of the day, right? They're tired of the constant outrage. They're tired of leaders who appear reactive. When the world feels unstable, people look for anchors. A focused candidate becomes an anchor, not loud, not dramatic, but steady and clear. Repetitive in the best way. Now, here's something critical. Pay attention here. Foreign conflicts may spike the headlines, but unless those conflicts directly and deeply affect daily American life for an extended period of time, domestic concerns will always dominate midterms. History shows this repeatedly. Even during major international events, voters ultimately ask, is my local government working? Is my state improving? That's the referendum. Now let's talk about how to structure a speech during uncertain times. Open with acknowledgement. Brief, measured, and then move. For example, let's like this. We're watching events overseas carefully. National security matters, and we support our troops. But here at home, families are facing rising costs, struggling schools, and safety concerns. That's what I'm running to fix. That pivot is leadership. It shows awareness without losing direction. Now let's talk about something else that matters deeply: confidence. When a candidate appears distracted, voters sense uncertainty. When a candidate appears distracted, voters sense uncertainty. When a candidate appears grounded in their priorities, voters sense competence. Substrate. Confidence does not mean arrogance. It means steadiness. It means not being shaken by every headline. It means not letting cable news dictate your platform. But let's back up and give a 30,000-foot view. What does this matter beyond one election? Because governance itself requires focus. If candidates drift during campaigns, they will often drift in office. If they chase headlines during campaigns, they often chase headlines in office. But if they build discipline during campaigns, they can build discipline in governance. And disciplined governance leads to predictable policy. Predictable policy leads to economic confidence, and economic confidence leads to growth. And growth, as you know, improves lives. It's all connected. Now, I told you I can make anybody understand this. Let's simplify it just a little bit more. Imagine you're trying to buy a house. Would you rather have a builder who constantly changes the plans before someone shouted advice from the street? I mean, if somebody was shouting advice from the street and they kept changing the plans, would you trust them? Or would you trust the builder who follows a blueprint carefully? Campaign focus is blueprint discipline. The blueprint is affordability, education, safety. Stick to it. There's another point that eighth graders understand instinctively. If someone keeps changing topics during a presentation, the class tunes out. But if someone clearly states their topic and reinforces it throughout the class follows. And we saw this during the State of the Union address. The State of the Union address was a masterclass on speech writing on how to pound home the same themes no matter what you were talking about, no matter what the subject was. The same themes kept rolling back. It's a masterclass and was executed masterfully because consistency signals seriousness. Now let's address the deeper layer. Midterms are often about control and balance. They're about checks on leadership. But even in that environment, state level candidates must avoid being pulled purely into national fights because state voters want state solutions. Yes, national politics influence mood. They do. Yes, federal policy affects budgets, but governors and legislatures still have specific responsibilities, and the voters know it. All right, let's talk about some messaging traps. Trap one, trying to sound tough by escalating rhetoric. When global tensions rise, some candidates feel pressure to sound hawkish. But if they overreach, they appear theatrical, performative. State leadership is not about theater, it's about administration. Trap two, trying to satisfy every audience. And I think everybody falls into this trap. Some voters do care deeply about foreign policy. Some care deeply about taxes. Some care deeply about schools. The solution is not to chase each group separately. The solution is to build a core message that touches all of them through state level competence. Trap three, social media reactivity. The loudest voices online do not present the majority of views because most voters are quiet. They're busy. They're raising families. They're not posting online constantly. Campaigns that chase social media outrage cycles lose touch with the majority. Now, let's talk about tone. Calm, measured, matter of fact, because authority does not require volume. It requires clarity. An eighth grader can understand calm authority. So can a voter. So let's bring this back to where it starts, the kitchen table. Let's say, and this happens in my house, and it probably happens at yours too. A family is deciding how to vote. We get our uh, our mock ballots, and we open them up, and we're reading together how we're going to vote. Now, we're not reading policy white papers. What we're asking is, who understands in this group of people, who understands my life? Who understands my pressures? Who seems the most focused? And importantly, who seems the most serious? The candidate who repeatedly says, I will lower your costs, strengthen your schools, and keep your community safe will resonate with the candidate who's debating foreign alliances for 20 minutes. Because one speaks to daily life and the other speaks to abstraction. Basically something that they'll never have control over and they'll never have a voice in. The other speaks to abstraction. Now, here's the final piece. Message discipline is respect. When you stay focused on affordability, education, and safety, you are respecting voters' real concerns. When you drift into distant debates that do not directly affect their daily life, you risk appearing detached because respect builds trust. Trust builds turnout, turnouts win elections. And let's close this. Let's close this way. It must be closed. Midterm elections are not about saving the world. They're about saving or serving your state. Yeah, the world matters. Yes, global stability is important, but governors govern states and voters vote locally. Affordability still matters. Education still matters. Public safety still matters. No headline is going to change that. No foreign crisis erases that. No cable panel overrides that. Bring it home. Every answer, every speech, every debate. Bring it home. Because elections are won in neighborhoods. They're won in grocery store parking lots. They're won in school pickup lines. They're won at kitchen tables. Stay focused. Stay disciplined. Stay clear.